Spot. Yeah, I think I hit a hard spot. It's definitely not the softest metal ever, but it should be able to. I should be able to drill through it. Now, I did actually have to make a whole set of new ones because these that I started machining, the metal it wasn't the softest ever, but it was machinable. But as soon as I tried to drill through this stuff, it immediately just dulled the drill bits and just would not work. Yeah, I don't know if this is like slightly hardened metal, but definitely was not. I definitely couldn't drill through it. So instead of trying to fight it and, you know, dull a bunch of drill bits and cutters and taps and possibly even break taps on these, I decided to just make some other stuff out of cold rolled steel. Now, Next thing is we got to connect all 4 of these together for these engine mounts. Now, originally I was thinking of just using plate steel to connect all this stuff together, but now that I think about it, I don't think I'd be able to do a nice, neat job if I used plate steel. So now I'm thinking, what if I used round stock? That way I can kind of, you know, do it a different way, and I don't know. Let's see what I can do with round stock. It's not easy welding underneath something. I got most of it. So the top engine mounts are finalized. I do like how they turned out. I am glad that I did the round stock instead of the plate steel. I don't think I could have done anywhere near as cool of a job with plate steel as I was able to do with the round stock. So now, next thing I want to work on is getting the chain going from the engine to the secondary transmission installed. Basically, we're going to do the same setup as the setup on the CBR 1000, which basically just have to make one of these. This is actually off of the CBR 1000. That engine is still in pieces. We're still waiting for the cylinders to be bored out and sent back to us, which actually they're done, and I got a message saying that they're sending them back, so we should get those next week. So therefore, we can finally finish rebuilding that engine within the next couple weeks. Now, basically all this is we took the splines off of the sprocket that fit on the outputs of the engine, welded it to the end of this, and then just put another sprocket all the way out here. We're gonna have to do the same thing, except we're probably gonna have to make it stick out a little bit further, like an inch or inch and a quarter, to get it past this this case that sticks out a little bit more than the one on the other engine. And then we're also gonna have to obviously put a bearing on the on this side of this to support it, as well as we need to put another bearing on this to support the input of the secondary transmission. So, it's a good thing I didn't weld this together yet because my math was off somehow. This sprocket is just a little bit too far out. Ideally, it needs to be there, and it's there. So, I think I just measured from the wrong side of the sprocket because it's almost the exact width of the sprocket that it needs to be moved further in. So, I think I just measured from the wrong side. Yeah, it needs to be like right there. So let me take a little bit more material off of this and a little bit more material off of this, bring it closer in, and that should get these lined up perfectly. So now that we got the sprocket just a little bit closer to the engine, I've been looking at the alignment now, and the alignment looks almost perfect. We do have a little bit of adjustability with this sprocket down here. We can move it in or out if we need to, so it doesn't have to be exact, but it does look almost exactly where it needs to be. So now, next thing is let's weld this stuff together. Once we do that, then we can put the next thing is let's weld this stuff together. Then once we do that, we can put the bearing on this end and then figure out how to attach it to the frame. Not bad, not bad. Yeah, with this setup, with this rotary table, it's almost impossible to do an ugly weld. Alright, so the bearing plate is tacked into place. Now, how I'm actually holding this thing in place, instead of like drilling a really long hole, instead of drilling a hole through this whole thing, because there is a threaded portion where you can put a bolt into this thing, but instead of doing that, what I'm actually using is a small stack of washers, and I'm actually using the bearing to hold this thing in place and push it in place. So you put the bearing on, and then that actually pushes it and then holds this thing, holds it in place once it's tightened. Just like that. That's pretty much the easiest way to do it. So now let's put the chain on and see what that looks like. So right now I'm leaving this chain super loose because I'm not exactly sure where this transmission is going to end up, because it can slide back and forth, and actually sliding it back and forth is going to tension the chain on the other side, and then this chain has to have a chain tensioner on it. So if we slide it forward, it should be at a decent tension. Just throw a tensioner on here somewhere. If we have to slide it back, then we may have to remove a link and still put a chain tensioner, but for now, because I'm not sure where this needs to be, let's just leave it super loose and we'll put a tensioner on it later. Now, I was going to start working on getting this bearing that supports the input of this transmission, getting this attached to the frame somehow, but I figured out that I need a piece of tubing that goes across here, but there's really nothing to attach to right here, and until later on in the build, I will be adding cross bracing, going from the bottom corner to the top corner on the other side, and that way I'll have a place to attach this piece of tubing to that. So that means we'll do this later. Let's work on something else for now. Let's start working on getting the chains and sprockets on this side finished. Now I'm going to be putting a 22 sprocket on the output of this, and we're replacing this 33 with this 22 tooth sprocket onto the jack shaft. So we're going to be swapping out this. This is a 33 tooth sprocket. This is actually the sprocket off of the CBR 1000. I just kind of put it here for mock-up purposes, and we're going to be swapping it out with this. This is a 22 tooth sprocket, and this is actually the gearing change that we did on the CBR 1000 after we took that thing to Durhamtown for the first time, and then we decided we wanted a gearing change. This is the gearing change that we did, so I'm just going to be doing it for this project. So this thing should kind of have similar gearing to the CBR 1000. I want this fit. I think this hub shrunk a little bit once I weld it, so I gotta shove the reamer through it again and get it to fit. Be right back. Got the sprocket in place, and while I was at it, I also put the brake disc on here. So next, let's start working on the output sprocket and hub. Now we're basically going to be copying the exact same setup on the CBR 1000 project, so let's just take some measurements off of that thing and just copy it. Alright, this thing is now ready for splines. Alright, so right now the dimension, the width of each spline right now is 0.25 and they need to be 0.37, that's the final dimension. Now, instead of just putting a bigger cutter on here, which I don't think this machine could handle, it was a little struggling with the cutter that's on here. Now, this is kind of an old machine, and while it cuts great with small stuff, it kind of struggles a little bit with big stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate this a little bit to get to that final dimension. I just need to figure out how much do I need to rotate this. And I'm just going to do trial and error. I'm just going to rotate it, do a cut, measure it. If it needs to go more, rotate a little bit more, do the cut again, and just keep going until it hits that final dimension of 0.37. And then once I do that, then I can recut all 6 splines. Alright, so I did have to take a file to this. If I did like another 5 or 7 thou depth of cut, it wouldn't have need filing, but I just had to file a little bit. And now it fits on here. Fits on here perfect. Look at that. Fits on here perfect. Look at that. And also I'm still able to fit the washer and the nut in here. And then you just tighten it with needle nose pliers. Look at that. So, I'm checking the runout, and this does have about like 10 thou of runout, which I remember the last one that I did, it had like, somehow I messed up the cut, and it had like 15 thou of runout. So this one being 10 thou is not as bad as the last one. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to mark where the high side is, which is right there, and then chuck this in the lathe with the same runout. So therefore when I machine this to final dimension, it eliminates the runout. So we still need to obviously finish machining this thing, get the sprocket installed on here, and we also need to machine another part that gets bolted onto here. So therefore we can have a bearing fit on here to help support this thing, and we still need to do the bearing for the input of this transmission, but we can't do that till we add some cross bracing and Once we do all that, then we can finally move on from hubs and sprockets and start working on more of the frame, get the steering installed. I'm still not sure how we're doing the steering. I have 2 ideas on how to do it. I'm not sure which is going to be the better way to do it yet. Also, I did buy a radiator that I think will fit in the front. It's a little bit smaller, but it's triple core, so it should have plenty of cooling capacity to cool this engine down. And also, I called the company that I bought the front shocks from and dealt with it to where they're going to send us, instead of 8 inches of travel, they're going to send us 10. They had those in stock, so they'll ship them out. I think today they're going to ship them out, so we'll get them sometime next week. That way we won't have to worry about waiting on shocks. Who knows when they're going to get here. Well, we know that they're going to get here next week, but it's just they're longer. We're not going to use as much travel, but at least we get something soon. So if we can finally get this thing standing on its own and install the suspension and all that kind of stuff and move on with that. So anyway, guess that's it for this video. Thank y'all for watching. I'll see ya in the next video.